So here we continue our look at the foreign policy of the Soviet Union under Brezhnev, and more specifically, this video is going to look at Eastern Europe, and even more specifically, the most significant thing that happened during this in Eastern Europe was the Prague Spring in 1968, and you can see an image there on the right, a poster in support of this. All right, and our learning objectives: understand the overall aims of Russian foreign policy under Brezhnev. And so in this video, as we're talking about Eastern Europe, consider how these overall aims connect with the policies enacted in Eastern Europe. Understand the policies, relationships with the West, with China, obviously, Eastern Europe. Analyze the success of those policies, and to analyze the impact of foreign policies domestically and the domestic situation on foreign policy. So what we're seeing here is the relationship between, it's the two-way relationship between what is happening domestically and what is happening outside of the borders. As you know, Eastern Europe is going to be important to the Soviet Union. The major role that it plays is as a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and the West. So it is an area of import because of national security. And this is going to dictate how the Soviet Union reacts to what's happening in Eastern Europe under Brezhnev. So the most significant challenge to Soviet domination in Eastern Europe came with the Prague Spring in 1968. It's kind of using the same idea that, as you know today, the Arab Spring. And it began with people increasingly unhappy with the regime of Novotny. It was very, very sort of cruel and limiting and very severe in the treatment of people. And people are increasingly dissatisfied with his regime. Now, he was replaced by this dude named Alexander Dubček in January 1968. And he became the first secretary of the Communist Party and basically, in charge of the government in Czechoslovakia. Now, he came to power and he was approved by Moscow, by Brezhnev. But once he comes to power, he introduces liberal reforms. And these liberal reforms leads to what is called the Prague Spring. And basically what Dubček did is he was trying to create a more liberal society. He allowed for freedom of the press and the restoration of civil liberties. Basically, he's allowing people to speak as they want to criticize if they want to. And he's also giving the people sort of the rights to participate in civil society as they like. That is, to form their own groups and to participate with their own ideas. And basically what Dubček was trying to do is he was trying to create something called socialism with a human face. So instead of the sort of monolith of government that was before, and there's only one way to participate in society, that is the way dictated by the government, he's trying to create a socialism that takes into account all of the differences and allows people to have more freedom. And there is a huge amount of support for this within the local population, obviously. And the thing is that Dubček goes to great lengths to reassure Moscow that, you know what, he's still totally into the communism thing. He's just changing things in his own country. This has nothing to do with the whole Soviet bloc or anything like this. And initially, Brezhnev and those in Moscow were okay with it. But ultimately, this doesn't work out. In August, Russian and other Warsaw Pact forces invaded the country. And Dubček and these other reformers were flown to Moscow, and they were forced to accept Brezhnev's demands. And the Czech people resisted passively, but no dice. Dubček is demoted, he is expelled from the party, and he now was sent to work as a forced official. So completely removed from the public eye, completely removed from any way that he could then become a source of, people could rally around him and become a source of opposition. And this invasion is condemned by the West. So this is one of those things that actually kind of works to shake up that relationship with the West. China condemns it. I know, right? Albania and Yugoslavia. Now, you might ask, why did Brezhnev get all cray-cray with this? Well, the thing is that Czechoslovakia was actually in talks with the International Monetary Fund and other Western financial organizations. Czechoslovakia was trying to organize loans to invest within the country to help develop it further. So for a lot of people, this seemed as though Brezhnev in Moscow, these Eastern European leaders, it seemed as though Dubček was trying to move Czechoslovakia away from communism. And so it needed to be nipped in the bud. Also, with the freedoms that he allowed in civil liberties, there were non-communist organizations appearing. There was this desire to reform the Social Democratic Party, which had been in power before the communist quote-unquote sort of revolution. So now what you're having in Czechoslovakia is the Communist Party, Dubček, allowing for this opposition to develop. And this, of course, could potentially undermine their own powers in their states. So you kind of have to nip this in the bud quickly before it infects other places. And one of the things that happens is there is a rumor spread that Czechoslovakia was planning on leaving the Warsaw Pact. Now this is really, really bad for Brezhnev. So because again, one of the purposes of having these Eastern European countries was to provide a buffer zone. If Czechoslovakia leaves the Warsaw Pact and at the same time is talking to these Western financial institutions, then there's a chance that Czechoslovakia could completely leave communism and leave a vulnerable spot for Russia. And so on the next couple of slides, we have some images of the Prague Spring. And so you can see here that Czechoslovaks are carrying the national flag past a burning Soviet tank in Prague. So the people did resist, mostly passively, but they also did set tanks on fire. Fire! And so here we have, there was a battle for the radio station, and you can see the destruction, the level of destruction of on the street, basically as the Soviet Union invaded and used the tanks. And so here, again, another image of the Soviet tanks. This one is in color. And so what you can see from the text, it says that Soviet tanks are occupying Prague. And in the occupation, or to justify the occupation, Brezhnev said that they had been asked by socialists, by communists within the Czechoslovak government, asking them to come and protect the country from this anti-communist and liberalist thing happening. So they were there on the invitation. And Brezhnev is completely unapologetic. So he invades Czechoslovakia. He violates the terms of the Warsaw Pact, which recognizes the sovereignty and the borders, the political borders of these states. And he does so with violence. But he is completely unapologetic. Instead, what he produces is something called the Brezhnev Doctrine. And in it, he says, when internal and external forces hostile to socialism attempt to turn the development of any socialist country in the direction of the capitalist system, when a threat arises to the cause of socialism in that country, a threat to the security of the socialist commonwealth as a whole, it already becomes not only a problem for the people of that country, but also a general problem, the concern of all socialist countries. There is no doubt that the actions of the 5 allied countries in Czechoslovakia directed to the defense of the vital interests of the socialist community will be increasingly supported by all those who have the interests of the present revolutionary movement at heart. So Brezhnev essentially produces a document similar to the Truman Doctrine. And basically he's saying, hey, if anybody is threatening socialism, if the people within the country are threatening socialism, then it is the right of the socialist community to intervene and make sure that the threat ceases to exist. So the Brezhnev Doctrine served as a reminder to other Eastern Bloc countries, essentially that the Soviet Union was the leader, and they need to toe the line. They need to stay within the margins of what the Soviet Union allows. And if they step outside of those bounds, then there will be harsh reprisals. However, despite this, and we'll see this come to head when we get into the late 80s, the desire for change continues to exist. In Czechoslovakia, it goes underground, but as soon as it seems that it's possible, it explodes out. Albania and Romania move closer to China. At the same time, they have signed trade deals with Western countries, as well as gotten involved with Western banks. So essentially, when they've done this, what it serves to do is to reduce some of the power that the Soviet Union has, because the Soviet Union is no longer fully controlling their economies. And then we'll talk about this in greater detail later when we look at our case study of Poland. But solidarity as a trade union is going to develop and essentially is going to also be the avenue that is used to bring democracy and take down the Communist Party. So despite this complete shuttering down of the Prague Spring, they don't get rid of these elements desiring expanded freedoms and liberties.